The film begins by showing a bustling activity of Mexico's biggest illegal drug-making factory. Imagine heaps of narcotics being prepared and packed, all under the radar. The U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA, has had enough of it, especially focusing on nailing the top dog of the largest cartel there, a guy named Memo Lucero. After tons of sleuthing and piecing together clues, the DEA, especially this dude, Sean Vetter, and his buddy Demetrius Hicks, who actually used to be a gangster before switching sides, get a hot tip. At that time, Lucero is throwing a massive party for his criminal pals in Tijuana. Soon after, Sean, Demetrius, and their DEA crew roll up to the party, swiftly taking down the guards and unleashing chaos with smoke grenades. It's an all-out attack, and they round up everyone they can. Lucero, being the slippery character he is, tries to make a run for it with his crew, but Sean's not having it. He hunts him down, outmaneuvering Lucero's guys, and slaps cuffs on the cartel leader. The big boss of the DEA, Frost, can't help but pat Sean on the back for pulling off such a bold move. Shortly after, Sean heads back to the US and into the arms of his wife, Stacy, with his mission accomplished. But the victory is short-lived. The US government joyously announces the fall of the cartel's power, but behind the scenes, another dark power is rising. A vicious gang led by a dude known as El Diablo starts wiping out what's left of Lucero's crew, even seizing a drug factory that once belonged to Lucero. Not long after, Lucero, who was stuck in an American jail, heard that news about something El Diablo had, and it wasn't good. Lucero quickly got in touch with his guy on the outside, Ramon Cadena, telling him to watch out for their other gang members. Lucero also had another pal, Mateo Santos, whom he asked to figure out how to deal with El Diablo and his bunch. However, things took a bad turn when Marta, one of El Diablo's crew, unexpectedly killed Ramon soon after he talked to Lucero. The following day, Vetter decided to have a party and invited all his close friends over to his place. Word got around about Ramon's death. Then, Frost shared his worry that if they don't do something about it, the situation will just get worse. But Vetter, he just wanted to have a good time with his pals, including an old friend from his gangster days, Big Sexy. On the other hand, all the illegal stuff Lucero was dealing with, well, it all got moved to El Diablo's place. El Diablo even teamed up with an American gangster, Slayton, often known as Hollywood Jack, to make sure everything went smoothly. And after they moved everything, Slayton told his guy Hondo to get rid of Vetter because he could be a real problem for their dirty business in America. At night, Vetter had a close call. 3 hitmen sneaked into his room, but luckily he was ready for them. Even with a gunshot wound to the stomach, Vetter managed to take them all down. He tried to get some info from one of the hitmen before he passed, but no luck. Then, in a panic, Vetter checked on Stacy, who'd also been shot, and he quickly called for help. Fast forward a few weeks, Vetter woke up in the hospital with his buddies, Frost and Hicks, right by his side. He was in for another shock, though, when he found out that Stacy had passed away just days before he woke up. Vetter, filled with grief, tried to leave the hospital, but Hicks helped keep him steady. After getting out of the hospital, Hicks took Vetter to visit Stacy's grave. At that moment, Vetter was heartbroken and spent a lot of his time alone, nursing his sorrows with alcohol. But after a while, his sadness turned into a need for revenge against those who were involved in Stacy's death. Then, Vetter decided to have a chat with Lucero, who was in prison, thinking maybe he had something to do with Stacy's murder. However, Lucero was tight-lipped at first, but after Vetter handed him a cigarette, he opened up a bit. He told Vetter that if he'd wanted him dead, he could have hired a hitman to do it a long time ago. Vetter took Lucero at his word, figuring that the cartel probably wasn't behind Stacy's death after all. Next up, Vetter asked his friend Hicks for a hand in figuring out who was behind his wife's murder. They decided the best bet was to team up with Big Sexy, who was still running around with street gangs. After Vetter filled him in on the plan, Big Sexy told them they needed to hit up Ghost Town, where they might find some answers from the local dealers. So, that night, the trio headed over to Ghost Town, with Big Sexy bringing along a drug-sniffing dog to help them out. The little dog did its job and found a car packed with illegal drugs pretty quickly. But when they were checking it out, a woman walked by and mentioned that the car's owner had overdosed and died. She pointed them towards a house that was known to be a hotspot for the local dealers. Following her tip, they checked out the house, but what they found was a gruesome scene because everyone inside was dead. And it got creepier. The word Diablo was carved into one of the bodies. This clue made them think that maybe El Diablo's crew was involved. And just as they were trying to piece things together, an unknown attacker jumped down from the ceiling, catching them off guard. Vetter, after getting the young guy hiding above the ceiling to come down, tried to get some answers about the massacre and who's running the drug scene in Ghost Town. However, that guy wasn't keen on talking at first, but after Vetter pointed a gun at him, he spilled the beans. He said that Slayton, who's linked with El Diablo, is the new big boss around there. Soon after, Vetter turned the guy over to the DEA for more questioning. Following the info, Vetter and Hicks tracked down Slayton, who apparently ran a salon that was a front for dealing drugs. There, Vetter tried a sneaky approach by pretending to be a cop and checking Slayton's car plate, which of course annoyed Slayton when he was ticketed for no reason. Then he prodded about Ghost Town and its drug trade. Even with Vetter's pressing, Slayton played it cool, not admitting to being the new boss of Ghost Town. Vetter, pretty ticked off and not getting the answers he wanted, was about to throw down with Slayton, but Hicks stepped in to cool things off and avoid a scene. At that time, a check on Slayton's plate turned up clean, so Vetter had no choice but to let him go. Later on, Slayton casually stopped by a friend's place for a supposed friendly drink, but out of nowhere, he killed his friend. He then rang Hondo, instructing his guys to get their drugs out on the street before any other dealers could. Slayton was also getting pretty fed up with Vetter hanging around, considering he was a threat to his and El Diablo's operations. Meanwhile, Mateo was on a mission to get Lucero's wife and son to a safe spot, but tragedy struck. Just as they got into the car, it exploded due to a gas leak, killing them both. When Mateo called Lucero to say how sorry he was, Lucero was devastated and unforgiving. He couldn't forgive Mateo for not keeping his family safe and even started doubting his abilities. Lucero, deep in thought, remembered how Vetter's wife also met a tragic end at the hands of El Diablo's crew. Feeling a shared pain, he reached out to Vetter, suggesting they team up to get back at El Diablo. After some consideration, Vetter felt Lucero was genuine and agreed to join forces, thinking it might lead him straight to El Diablo. Before parting, Lucero slipped Vetter a note with the name of a drug dealer he should look up. At that time, Vetter didn't hesitate and headed straight to meet the dealer, a guy named Pomona Joe, at his well-known small bar in California. To get on Joe's good side, Vetter played the part of a buyer wanting to distribute drugs in the States, even pretending he was stepping in for Lucero, all with the aim of ensnaring El Diablo and his gang. Soon after, Vetter and Joe had a pretty intense barter going on about the price, but eventually, Joe agreed to help with the deal. He even offered a girl to keep Vetter company, but having just lost his wife, Vetter wasn't having any of it. Then, Joe teased him, calling him gay, which really got under Vetter's skin, to the point that Joe nearly met his maker along with his gang. Scared, Joe tried to cool things down and shared details about the secret deal they'd make. The next day at the DEA office, Vetter was all business, leading a planning session on how to nab El Diablo or one of his cronies during the deal. The DEA agents would sneakily be at the deal spot, and when Vetter signaled, they'd swoop in for the arrest. Moving fast, Vetter met with Joe to do the shady drug deal away from prying eyes. When Joe rang up a guy from El Diablo's gang, Hondo showed up to make sure Vetter's money was good. At that time, Hondo, maybe feeling a bit too confident, admitted he'd offed a DEA agent's wife. Vetter, realizing this was the guy who'd ordered the hit on his wife, lost it. He beat Hondo to a pulp, but just as Joe tried to get his undercover cop friend to arrest Vetter, another DEA agent appeared. Suddenly, it was a full-blown firefight between Hondo, the DEA, and Joe's gang. Vetter, grabbing a fallen weapon, joined his DEA pals in the fight until all of Hondo and Joe's crew were down for the count, and the deal is failed. So, after the botched deal and a dangerous shootout that cost 3 DEA agents their lives, Frijost decided Vetter needed a timeout for his own good. He was ordered to step back from missions for a good 6 months. Frijost just thought Vetter needed a breather after losing Stacy. Reluctantly, Vetter handed in his badge, accepting the decision even though it weighed heavy on his heart. Heading back home from the office, Vetter thought he'd pay a visit to Lucero in jail and share the disappointing news that his revenge plan was on hold since he was badgeless and couldn't lean on his DEA pals for help. Hearing that, Lucero told Vetter that fighting monsters meant becoming one himself if he really wanted to bring down El Diablo. He handed Vetter a juicy tip about the location of El Diablo's cash stash in Mexico. There, he advised Vetter to snatch it to fund his vendetta. But first, Lucero wanted to be transferred to a different prison where he'd feel safer. Next on his unexpected day, Vetter scoped out Joe's bar, and suddenly there was Joe, miraculously still in the land of the living and looking all right. At that time, Vetter decided Joe could be useful again, particularly in guiding him to that cash stash Lucero had hinted at. The day after, Vetter thought it'd be a good idea to regroup with Hicks and their old crew, including Big Sexy, to take on El Diablo, their shared enemy. But Hicks, no longer the streetwise gangster he used to be, initially said no. He was thinking of his family, not wanting to paint a target on them by messing with drug dealers. Vetter, understandably, felt let down by this, so he set out to rope in other members of their old gang. After Vetter left, Hicks mulled it over and, realizing he viewed Vetter as a brother, changed his mind, deciding to rally their old gangster buddies after all. Soon after, Vetter, Hicks, and Big Sexy reunited and headed to Joe's bar with a plan to stir things up. They'd put Joe in a tight spot, forcing him to make a purchase from El Diablo's operation, all while under the threatening gaze of a gun. With no other choice, Joe rang Slayton and told him he was buying and paying cash. Hearing that, Slayton was thrilled cause not only was this a sale, but it was also his first order shipping to America, so he thought it deserved a special delivery and sent the goods over on a private jet. So, when Slayton got to the spot where the deal was going down, Vetter was right there to arrest him. There, Vetter wanted the scoop on El Diablo, but even when faced with the terrifying prospect of being buried alive, Slayton swore he didn't know, cause all their business had been done without ever meeting face to face. Taking Slayton's word for it, Vetter headed to Mexico, hatching a plan to nab the mafia. He cleverly hid a listening device in the cash that Slayton was meant to hand over to El Diablo. Once in Mexico, Slayton passed the money bag to someone from El Diablo's crew, but because he was late with the deposit, the mafia's guys shot him dead right there. Soon after, Vetter and his crew, using the tracking device, were hot on the trail, arriving at El Diablo's main base. The trio managed to sneak in, taking out guards as they went, until Vetter found himself face to face with El Diablo. And it shocked him to the core that the man he'd been hunting was actually Mateo. That's when Mateo spilled the beans that all this chaos was orchestrated by Lucero, who wanted to use Vetter for his own escape plans during a prison transfer. As Vetter tried to process this mind-blowing revelation, Mateo's henchmen sprang into action, attacking him. But Hicks was there in a pinch, helping Vetter fend them off, and then it was a mad dash to catch Mateo, who was making a break for it through a water channel. Then the two clashed, with Vetter getting shot in the leg, but with the last of his strength, he managed to retaliate and shoot Mateo, ending him right there. The next day brought shocking news that Lucero had slipped away during a prison bus transfer. Feeling a mix of responsibility and vengeance, Vetter headed straight to Lucero's hometown village to arrest him. The place, heavily guarded by Lucero's elite forces, didn't intimidate Vetter even a bit cause his mind was solely fixed on avenging his wife. Lucero, spotting Vetter in the village, was visibly stunned, having thought the DEA agent was long dead by El Diablo's hand. Vetter, his heart pounding with a mix of anger and satisfaction, initially wanted to end Lucero right there. But a different idea formed. Why not let Lucero rot away in prison instead? So instead of pulling the trigger, Vetter slapped the cuffs on him and nodded at an undercover DEA agent to take Lucero in. In the end, we see Vetter at Stacy's grave, startled and touched to find her tombstone replaced by a more beautiful one, a heartfelt gesture from Hicks and the crew. A silent thanks floated from Vetter to his friends who had always had his back, and with that, the screen fades to black, the film ends. The moral lesson from this film is when you seek revenge, always remember to bring along a drug-sniffing dog and a listening device in your cash bag. It'll make catching the bad guys much easier.